Going live. Okay, we should be live and everyone should hear us. Hi everyone, welcome to BrisJS. Thank you so much for joining us on the live stream. Welcome to 2021. It's kind of a late welcome. We're already in February, as is our tradition to start in February. Also, thanks for bearing with us with the whole week change. We wanted to make sure we can line up as many speakers as we could, and it worked a lot better if we could do everything on this Monday instead. Thankfully, with the at home and streaming kind of scenario that we've got going on, that should be, pretty good. People's flexibility rather than having to travel to Toowong is hopefully a bit easier. I've been checking on the chat there. Where everyone is. I do appreciate that people have been trying to simulate the experience by going, for example, to Toowong. I heard somebody was going to do that on the comments on Meetup, and they were just going to sit there and stream it in Toowong. And I've seen somebody else there is going and watching on the grass at South Bank. That's an excellent idea. So, hopefully the Mozzies are staying away from you there, actually. But thanks very much for joining us. I'm going to throw the slides up here, so don't forget, because we've done that before. And so hopefully that's all good, and you can see slides and you can see me as well. Okay, so let's get through the usual preamble. Just to give everyone the notification that we do have Slido set up. We've got a new number for this one. It's 221. I try and reuse them if the platform allows, if nobody else has grabbed the number. But 1110 is taken now this year. So 221 it is. It's 0221. So yeah, I'll leave that up for a second. Make sure everyone grab the number. So yeah, you can just go to slido.com. That lets us sort of lets you leave questions for presenters. We've got a poll up there and you can give feedback and things like that. I'm always keen to get those. We're going to have a poll where you can win a license to Coochin or sorry, just getting the messages through here. Anyway, I'll go to that slide and I'll give it the proper introduction. All right, that's hopefully long enough. There's some links actually in the description on YouTube as well, or on Meetup. Okay, let's begin. So yeah, we're all distributed, but I think it's really important to still go and do that little bit of research and acknowledge the traditional owners of your location. So we are broadcasting from Yatala here, that's where I live, and that's bordering on the country of the Yugara and Bundjalung people. So I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of this site on which we broadcast from today, the Yugara and Bundjalung people. And I'd also like to pay my respects to elders past and present. Meetup.com, that's hopefully where you heard about us. If you didn't, do let me know. That's actually really useful information. But if if it helps for stats actually in this day and age, even though we're online, to tick the RSVP, it helps me understand where folks are coming from. It also gives me an opportunity to then send you follow-up emails if we have any scheduling changes, and you get notified about that stuff. So you would have seen that this week, last week, sorry. And so yeah, that gives you a bit of a communication mechanism there as well, rather than having to go and check each time. But I do try and mail out to the mailing list as well, and keep everyone up to date. Code of conduct. It's a super important thing to make sure that you do not harass everyone. It is a harassment-free experience for everyone. That is online too, folks, in chats, in Slidos, in our various online places. So please do make yourself aware of what the code of conduct says. If you've got any questions about it, you can definitely reach out to me. And there's also a couple of other links on that code. You can also do reporting in the same manner. Call for presenters. I harp on about this one every single time for good reason. We really need to have the talk submissions. So thank you so much to everyone who has submitted a talk. for this month. We've been able to provide everyone with 4 wonderful speakers this month, which is rare in this kind of online format as well. So I'm really glad that everyone's been able to, take the time and build up the talks from December to February. Really appreciate that, and everyone coming forward with these suggestions. But we're going to need them every month for the next 11 months. So please do make sure you put one in. If you know that you might not have enough time to go and contribute one for next month, to 2 months ahead, anything is fine. We can go and handle the scheduling through our GitHub issues. So if you go to GitHub, BrisJS, there's the repo for meetups, and our issues are linkable off that. That's where we go and try and organize everything, tag it and put it in a milestone, which is what month we're going to present in. So I use that for a bit of scheduling and for confirmations and stuff, and for the main form of communication between all our speakers as well. So that's where it goes. There's a couple of handy links to be able to go and create some pro forma kind of templated submissions if you don't know what to write. And I'll go through that. But first, I'll just touch on our various means of comms. So we've got a Facebook page, we've got our YouTube, which you're obviously on, and we've got the Twitter. So yeah, we're on there too. Just got a question through from Susan. Do you guys accept talks from beginners? We absolutely do. If you've got something interesting, you've got some experience that you want to share with people, it's a great idea to do talks. I would love to help you with that. So please do reach out. Yeah, I can give you a hand there. BrisJS.org there has a link there to be able to present, and it's got a bit of info. You can click that link and it'll take you through the GitHub issues and fill out a bit of starting information for you if you need. And that kind of helps to center everything together. There's also a job board on there. If you're in need of a job, this is reading all the GitHub issues that are marked as jobs and employment, and it'll present them there automatically. So if you've got something to submit, put that in there, and I will tag it appropriately when it meets our criteria, and it'll get put up there and everyone can see this job. It's completely free. We just want to make sure that people inside the organizations can broadcast this. So if you're a dev and you want to have somebody come work with you, this is a great way to do it. We've got community sponsors, of course, as usual. There's no pizza and beer to kind of present, but there is, of course, the Zoom sponsorship that we use here. So this is my employer, PCCW Global. I work in the delivery and support agile release train, and that's a big fancy way of saying that we work on innovation around the delivery processes and all the supporting features and tool sets around our organization. And we're trying to hire. So there's a senior role and a mid-JS web developer role. Those are open. I'd love to hear from everyone from Brisbane. Got a Brisbane office here, and it's pretty cool, even though a lot of folks choose to work from home, and this is a role that absolutely allows you to work from home as well, since we're going to be working predominantly with folks in Hong Kong, in Philippines, in Greece. It's a very global, multinational kind of company, and a really cool opportunity. So do feel free to chat with me if you want to look at that. Thanks for them to support our Zoom Pro. Wallaby. Some folks on the Gold Coast who make some really cool software productivity tools. They have been giving away code licenses for their tools to BrisJS for ages now, months and months. So thank you very much for that. I'm still trying to reach December winner. So keep an eye on your inboxes, folks. I will, I'll promise I'll make sure I'll put names up for both winners in the next month. But we've got another one to give away this month as well. For either Quokka.js or Wallaby.js. So the folks at Wallaby, thank you very much for your submission. We're going to do that through Slido. So there's a poll on there. I will listen to the talks, try and come up with a question on the fly and pop that question on there. And then I'll let everyone know on the channel that there's something to go and click on. And Ash Kid, thank you so much for putting links in there. It's nice to have you on the channel. He is also one of the wonderful reasons why we have a website at all, because tell you what, it's something that I've always wanted to add to and improve, and it is definitely on my to-do list for 2021. So that's a great thing to keep working on as well. So thanks everyone, and thanks to Ash Kid. Hi mate. Yeah, continuing on tonight, we've got a whole bunch of cool presenters, as I've mentioned. What's the best form of way to communicate with me? You can hit me up on Twitter. There's also the @BrisJS Twitter. You can throw up a GitHub issue. They'll all end up with me. So please reach out. There's also Kevin V @brisjs.org. That'll work as well. Okay, back to the schedule. So going with the flow, building nodes with JS for Node-RED. So Stephen Coochin is going to be presenting that. And then we're going to look at the mobile app development for Noobs using React Native and Expo from Scott Pollard. And we're also going to have REST client from Ashley, famous Ashley. He's done a whole bunch of talks with us. Thanks again for returning with another lightning talk. We're also having service workers for PWAs. Aminur, great to have you with us. Thank you so much for submitting this talk as well. Looking forward to getting some more info about service workers as well. And then, yeah, that'll be closed for February. So thank you very much, everyone. Bear with us, and I hope you enjoy the night. That is not the right slide. That is the end slide. I'm going to stop sharing right now and then introduce you to Stephen, who's going to take you through what he's doing with Node-RED and a bit of JavaScript there. Well, 1 second. For some reason, it's not relinquishing the sharing. There we go. My apologies. Stephen, how are you? You're in some sort of very technological format there. What's that interesting?
I am.
Background?
I'm just about. I think it's actually from Star Citizen, but it looks very Jedi. So it's the flavor of the day. I don't know. I kind of switch between them because we're all on video. Well, we live on video now. We exist in the video world, right?
We do. We do. Thanks so much for joining us, mate.
Oh, no, thank you. I think we were talking about this the other day, but I'd actually love to add some, well, IBM developer would like to add some delivery vouchers to the prize pool tonight if you can work those in. I have some delivery vouchers.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, yeah. So yeah, I'll clarify for everyone, everyone who's submitted a talk tonight, congratulations, you're getting a present from IBM developer. So thank you very much for supporting us. And thank you, DeveloperSteve.
All right, thank you. Is my AV and slides and everything okay?
Everything's perfect. We've got you on video. I'm going to hide myself and let you take stage.
Cool, thank you. So amazing to be here, and hello everyone. So amazing to be here. I always love geeking out with the BrisJS group because you're all cool. I don't really say that to everyone. Well, you're just cool. Like I've been fortunate enough to do a few talks and a few things over the years. And hello, hopefully we get to all be together again soon. Because I know for you, I miss those IRL events. So hopefully we get to do that again soon. Just going back to what Kevin was saying at the start with acknowledgement to country, I'd like to pay my respects to the traditional owners on the lands in which we meet today, including here, I'm actually in Ballarat. So it's the Wadawurrung people. Always, worth looking up to see who your local groups are and just acknowledging them at the start of meetings, always great to do. So as I said, amazing to be here. Big shout out to organizers, Kevin, for putting the event together. So I can feel that chat at the moment, everyone going, woo. Anyway, I will get underway. For those that don't know me, hello, I am DeveloperSteve. Actually, this is the first time I've presented at BrisJS with my new name. So I got married a few years ago. We combined our last names together. And so my married name is Coochin. It's a combination of Cooper and Houchin. And while I was there, I was like, you know what? I'm going to see if I can get DeveloperSteve as a middle name. Guess what? I got DeveloperSteve as a middle name. So there you go. It just kind of made sense. It just kind of made sense. But for those that don't know me, I'm a developer advocate here at IBM Developer. Well, I say here at, but like I'm not really here at, I'm at home. But anyway, you get the idea. I've been I've been a developer advocate for a number of years through a few different companies. So no doubt for those that I have seen before, a big hello. And for those that I'm meeting the first time, hello again, or hello for the first time. Anyway, one of the things I always love doing at the start of my talks is a developer joke. And I have a brand new one for you. Like literally, I came up with this somehow at the end of last year. Why does IT support love quantum computing so much? No one can say why does like ask the question for that, but so I'm going to tell you the answer. It is because they can turn it off and on at the same time. Aha, quantum state. Not a JavaScript one, but I do have some of those, but we'll keep those for later because I'm going to get onto the talk. So one of the things, for those that aren't familiar with Developer Advocate, we essentially get to run events and geek out with community and just knowledge sharing, and well, it's kind of fun because to do all those things. But one thing in particular we did a lot of events around last year was our Core for Code series. So it was global hackathon series, and I've already seen some hackathons start to ramp up, and Core for Code is back this year. So I thought this is a good talk because one of the winners, or one of the second place finalists, or the second place finalist last year globally for the first time ever, was one of our teams from UNSW in Sydney, Business Buddy. They came second globally. There was a lot of entries over previous years. So they actually managed to take out second place spot amongst a lot of entries. Like there was a lot of things to review last year. They basically built a chatbot in 24 hours in one of the hackathons we ran earlier in the year. So it was actually the last hackathon we ran locally, May, for the global, as part of the global series. But they used Node-RED to prototype out and really quickly build out an MVP just for that hack. And then we worked with them afterwards to sort of build that out more. And they ended up deploying it into Angular, but I'll get to the code because all this code's available online. Node-RED is an open source platform. For those that haven't seen it before, and you're going to say low code, but I actually write like JavaScript code, right? Like I write proper code. No. You can use it to do some really advanced stuff. And like I said, it's really handy, particularly in a hackathon scenario, because when you've got 24 hours to build something out, not only does this do it for you really quickly and really easily, but you can have something visual to show and to walk through and to step through. So sometimes there's judges that are non-technical. This sort of makes things nice and easy. You can run it locally too. So as you can see there, it does a really nice drag and drop interface. You can pick through it. There is actually some function nodes where you can write JavaScript in the node itself, which is a bit meta because I'm going to cover I'm going to talk quickly about how to build a JavaScript node for Node-RED, or a Node-RED node. Oh, so meta. But yeah, you actually can write JavaScript inside the JavaScript node. Anyway, I'm getting lost in my own loop. One of the things that I always love is you can actually build out dashboards really quickly with this as well. So as you're building out and dragging these nodes across, and it's very multi-purpose. Some of the stuff we're going to be looking at, some of the projects that I'm doing today, yeah, it's very, very varied, but we'll get to that. And yeah, you can get as complex as you want. Like that is, I actually don't quite know what that's doing, but hey, there's a lot of complexity going on in that flow. The other thing is these flows that you see here, you can actually export that as JSON and just import that into another Node-RED. Plus it's collaborative, so a few people can be working on the same flow at the same time, which is really, really cool. So some things that I've used it for before, I bought a coffee table a few years ago. It looked like a giant iPad, and I thought, that's going to be fun with 300 lights in it. So I hooked it up to Node-RED. So literally, it was a coffee table at ESP32S2. For those that, no, that's a DevKit C. Sorry, it's a DevKit ESP DevKit C. They're like $10 these days. They're probably cheaper. For those that are IoTs among us, I love IoT things. A whole bunch of addressable LEDs because those are always fun. I'm just using, for that particular flow, I was just using MQTT through Watson IoT. But I mean, you can use just about any broker. And of course, Node-RED. Fun fact too, at the wedding, the same code that I've got this code on my GitHub, but the same code I used for that, I tidied up a few things I actually used on the top of my wedding cake too. So slightly different setup. So the coffee table, I was using a Google Home. And if this then that, and then just it hits an endpoint, and that was the easiest way to do that. I know there could have been a whole bunch of other more interesting ways to do it, but essentially I set up an endpoint, and then if this then that sent through the word that I asked Google to change the color of the coffee table to, and it filters through. It's actually converting it to an RGB JSON string and then sending it through the broker and then to the device itself. But anyway, I know I could have done that a whole bunch better, probably with a whole bunch of regex. Yeah, that's what it does. You can get it to change a whole bunch of different colors. Like I said, Node-RED is really cool because it is versatile, and in particular in a hackathon scenario or an MVP, you can build out stuff ridiculously fast. This is a demo I did last year with Call for Code with Telstra Dev's evangelist Michelle Howie. And basically it's using a, I normally have the board near me, but that's what it looks like there. It's using one of the Telstra IoT networks, CAT-M1 for those IoTists among us. And basically that's right, I switched this one around so that Node-RED actually controlled when it was sending updates from an environmental shield. So Node-RED would send a message into the broker, the device would be registered to that, it would pick that up. That's what the Arduino side of things looks like. And then respond back with the environmental data, like just as a JSON string. The good thing with this is, and it was a slight upgrade on my wedding code because it's basically doing the same thing just without the environmental shield, is that the server actually controls when the updates are being sent through. The other thing is, so we actually got this to talk to the Telstra Dev API through some flows as well. So you can actually communicate, or end users can communicate with it through SMS. You literally just send temp and it will message back with whatever the current temperature is, or at least whatever the last temperature was when it last got an update. And you could do that with any of the variables from the environmental shield. Literally, I was storing those in globals because we were avoiding a database, but you could also do it in a database as well and just get it to respond back with like an average or the last entry, et cetera, et cetera. You can actually, so like I said, you can actually build out your own nodes as well really, really easily. And normally when I do this, I just run it locally. Actually the last node I built, and it's all open source community, so open source platform, and all these nodes are like a massive community of them. So if someone hasn't built the thing you're looking for, which I needed a social aggregator this one time, so I use one of the JS libraries and then wrapped that into a Node-RED package and deployed it into, I think it was the Veriverse, actually, which might be depreciated now. Anyway, you get the idea. It's fairly easy to set up. It's literally a function inside a JS file, and then you can just pull it down through the main Node-RED repository into Node-RED itself, or you can npm install as well into the directory that you've got it running in. So the code for the IoT sensor thing I just talked about, that's actually sitting on that URL might be a little bit long, so I'll drop it in the chat after this. But that's sitting on Michelle Howie's repository. The JSON flow, the Arduino code, and like how to set everything up is all there. You can run Node-RED for free in pretty much every cloud provider's free tier. You can run it locally. It runs on a Raspberry Pi. It's kind of cool. And yeah, great for those little projects. We have a whole bunch of sample code on the developer portal as well, so check it out. This one is actually one of the code kits from last year's Call for Code as well. Actually using this at the moment to build out a legal advice chatbot for a Indigenous co-working group we're working with called Barry Amel. So we're actually hooking that up with the SMS, Telstra Dev SMS, so that peeps can ask some basic legal advice through it as well, running through Watson. And literally that's the flow right there. And yeah, you can use the same code. It is built straight off one of the code kits. Already talked about that one. Oh, that's all I actually had slide-wise. Just to wrap up, I always love finishing this one is please use your developer superpowers for good. And of course, as always, be excellent to each other. Thank you very much.
Awesome. We've got some time for questions. 1 second. I'll just make sure I'm on the polls. I don't. All good. I don't see anything in the chat and in the stream. I think you've blown them all away. I think
I was worried about going over because I hadn't rehearsed. Spoilers.
Oh, yeah, it's all good. Well, I mean, like, you know, you can always take a few more minutes. And what should people do if they wanted to go and write a little JS module? Like, where do they grab their first code or a template or something like that, and then they can go from there to embed their logic? Where would they start?
Inside, so it's all with the naming on that initial file. The file name has to match the function name. And yeah, actually the function side of it's like really, oh, I'm not sharing screen anymore. I just locked my computer. Yeah, the actual functionality side of things, really easy, like, because it all kind of is, once you've played with Node-RED a little bit, you kind of get the premise that everything's built around the flow transport. So you can add anything you want into the namespace of that transport itself. But there's some really good docs, sort of, and even a template to get started on the node-red.org site as well. So yeah, cool. Actually the docs are really good and pretty easy.
Nice. So people should be heading to node-red.org/docs/getting started.
Yes. Yeah.
Awesome. That's great. Yeah, no, I think it's obviously if you're into you know, Internet of Things and any kind of home automation or whatever, you would have run into somebody saying you should probably use Node-RED, and that would be I would be in that category. But it is not exclusively for that. There's no monopoly on that. Like you mentioned. Yeah, okay, you can go and talk to hardware and run that stuff. And that makes it really easy, right? This is why people who are messing with hardware are doing it, because they can bring that hard functionality into this, you know, visual programming paradigm, so that you can see where logic moves through, and you can put each of those pieces of functionality as like functional programming kind of concepts into those flows. And so that lets you just, I guess, recompose all that functionality and reuse that as much as you want. So it's actually a good thing to kind of you know, get people thinking in the mind of functional programming as well. Something that does one thing and outputs.
Totally. The library, or the node that the last node that I published was a social aggregator node. So it actually grabbed multiple feed in from an array. And the good thing is you can throw a multiple of keys at it. So when you get rate limited, you can switch to another key. But yeah, you can pull in a whole bunch of social data. And then I was actually doing sentiment analysis on it to bring back whether it was positive, negative, in between, just to, it was a small analytics project. Yeah, it was all open source.
That's fantastic. Yeah, no, like you said in your preamble for your talk as well, like you know, hackathons and things would be, you know, really benefiting from this as well, because like you said, it's concurrent, people can work together. So I can definitely see a use case there as well. And you know, it's fantastic for prototyping, like you said. It's really cool. You know, and I'd like to see this, you know, running you know, your next startup, right? Like this is a workflow engine that, you know, like you could go and, sure, you can go deploy ZB, but, you know, this is extremely easy to work with when you want to prototype that up. So yeah, do that and then, you know, migrate to something when you need to have the bullet power. But yeah, fantastic. Thanks so much for your talk. And we'll just double check for any questions while I was waiting. Everyone says nice, so big round of applause.
Thank you.
That's fantastic. Well, good. If you've got any more questions for DeveloperSteve, we can always take them and circle back. We can have a little fireside chat at the end of this session as well, and answer any Q&A if you've missed the opportunity to get that speaker's questions. So thanks very much. We will now jump over to, you're very welcome. We'll now jump over to Scott Bolland. Scott, are you out there? I can hear
Hey.
things. There he is. How you doing?
Good.
Awesome. Thanks so much for joining us and for presenting at BrisJS.
Well, thank you. And I was going to get really technical here, and I had it set up that I could have my little face in the corner and all this sort of stuff. But I was told if I do that, it doesn't go full screen and it gets all fuzzy and it's a complete fucking waste of time. So I think I'm going to ditch this and actually do a proper screen share after all my hard work setting it up properly.
I'm so sorry to bring you that terrible news. Yeah, it's
it does.
Zoom decides that
timing.
It's freaking awesome. I love it. And like we could press on if you like, because the only thing that happens is the code. The text is going to be a little bit fuzzy because the way that Zoom works, for everyone watching at home, you might want to record things off Zoom as well. It decides that our faces are less important to capture, and so therefore we are not in the full. At the moment it's 720. We don't get 1080 streams during the pandemic. Their bandwidth was melting, so you don't get the full 720 output. And if you're broadcasting from your face, so therefore, if you're doing OBS, it's considered a webcasting stream or a webcam, and so you don't get that res. But if you do a screen share, it gives you as much res as you want because it treats that as a highly compressible image. So, a little tiny caveat that I had to learn the hard way, and we did with some presenters in the past. So. All good. You do whatever makes it more comfortable for you, Scott.
Yeah, no. Well, since people, because I was watching the other screencast, and you have your little face in the corner anyway, so It's all good. But I'll share my screen. Kevin, if you want to stay live and ask me any questions as we go,
sure.
Keep it interactive, and I'll just make sure that this is working. Share screen. Can you see my screen?
Certainly can.
Cool. So just to start at the high level, what my aim was, I've been programming since I was 12 years old. First computers on the market, and so I've been programming forever. Most recently playing with React, and I was recently given a challenge to try and get an app up and running within a week, having no previous experience with app development. So having a background in React and trying to switch to React Native is kind of what I want to talk about today, and how it is possible with this background to basically get the knowledge within a couple of days, how to switch over and make a native mobile app. It's pretty straightforward. So I just wanted to share some of my reflections. This is for complete beginners, so I do apologize if there's people who know a hell of a lot more about this than I do. But I am trying to, as I said, for people who might be interested in app development and it seems a bit scary, I just want to use this opportunity to reflect and say it isn't actually that bad. And here are some tools, here are some tutorials that will get you up and running in a couple of days. So really that's the high level idea of this talk. Bit about me. My background officially is in cognitive science, which is the scientific study of how the mind works, spanning such things as neuroscience, IT, artificial intelligence. So my actual PhD was in AI many years ago, and I play currently in the EdTech field. I have a company called New Dawn Technologies where we're using React, Redux, AWS Amplifier, serverless, that sort of stuff for our web development. I've got another company again in cognitive science called The Agile Life, where we actually teach leadership and business coaching, but using the agile methodologies. So we teach companies to boost their resilience in complex and uncertain times using design thinking agile methodologies. And this is kind of what I wanted this app for, in a hurry for some of my clients. So for today, I really wanted to talk about is something DeveloperSteve just flagged was using your superpowers for good. And I just wanted to spend a couple of minutes talking about how design thinking and agile is actually used outside of programming these days, and how you can use the same methodologies for solving a lot of even personal problems through to business problems using the same agile methodologies as you actually use during coding. It's actually quite interesting, quite a powerful framework. So things like, finding a career, finding work, business coaching,
yeah, the whole range of things we're using Agile for. And then I'll show you sort of this app that I'm working on and some of the lessons learned, how I approached that, some of the tutorials I went through, as I said, try and get you up and running ASAP. So talking about Agile and how it's used, we have this Agile manifesto, which was basically saying that that waterfall methodology of starting with the endpoint in mind, this is the product that you should be developing, and that is a solid concrete plan, never actually doesn't particularly work well in practice. Agile, if it's done wrong, also doesn't work well in practice. But the idea here is what you're trying to do is come up with working prototypes and have a closer connection with your clients. So getting ongoing feedback as to what works. So you basically, rather than thinking your way forward, you actually prototype your way forward, getting feedback as you go. And that approach actually works well in a whole range of other domains. So if you're interested, there's a course called Designing Your Life, which is actually one of the most popular courses at Stanford University. And they talk about how to use these sorts of methodologies for a whole range of sort of real world problems. And as I said, what they say is don't think your way forward. You can't, your mental model, particularly in uncertain and complex times, for example, even career planning, I don't know what the jobs are going to be like in 5 years' time. I don't have that that mental model. What you need to use is the real world for prototyping ideas. So building your way forward rather than thinking your way forward. So just touching back what Steve was sort of saying, use your superpowers for good. It is interesting, as I said, if you're interested in this sort of stuff, that you can use Agile methodologies for a whole range of other things. Just to give, and this is kind of what my app is doing. So I coach in this domain, businesses. I've taught, military, police, right through. I'm working with Telstra at the moment, sort of coaching these sort of methodologies. Just to give you a real world example from this book, which is Designing Your Life. If you're interested in designing such as something like a career, what they do is start with your compass. So this is similar to software engineering, where you basically have a user story, which is, as me, I want a job that pays enough, is engaging, is impactful, is joyful. That's kind of the user story for yourself. And how do you prototype your way forward? So here I develop a compass, which is basically saying where I currently am. This is an example of some prototyping, some ideas. You can use mind mapping, a whole range of things for generating a range of possibilities. This is my daughter, currently looking for work. I just got her to write down the word joy, write down the first 5 things that come to mind when she thinks about joy, write down the first 5 things that come to mind when she thinks about all these sorts of things. So her joy comes from her boyfriend, driving, going out, hair and makeup, singing. But when you go through these outer rings, you can say, well, what sort of jobs can you look for that might bring you joy? And hers was sort of, retail for the time being, makeup artistry. She has a degree in that, music because she's an amazing performer. But how do you turn that into actual paying career? And what you do is basically have these high-level aspirations, break it down to 3-month goals. What might you want to accomplish? And that's where sort of the Agile comes in. What do you want to achieve the next 2 weeks? Sort of break it down to sprints. And from that, you do sort of things to do today. But how this differs from normal goal setting and how the Agile methodology actually works in practice is at each stage, you get this reflective feedback. So at the end of a sprint or at the end of a day, you're reflecting, well, what worked, what didn't, why? How's that going to affect your high level goals? So again, it's that constant, same with Agile, it's the constant interaction with your clients that's giving you feedback. With Agile in the real world, it's that constant interaction with the real world that's giving you that feedback. So it's a lot more flexible. And as I said, this can be used in a whole range of business strategies. So the app that I'm working on basically is a coaching app for some of my clients that kind of reflects this process. And this is using Expo to basically prototype it. As I said, it's still in prototype, but here you see aspiration sprints, to-do list. And this is some of my aspirations that I'm working on, and my daughter's sort of work is down the bottom, but it's all sort of native code. Here you can specify your goals. This is sort of that high level compass that you can set. You can have this conversation with people, get them to create their own. How important is each of those features? Then you basically specify high-level goals, sub-goals, and from this you can say, well, what do you want to achieve in the next sprint? And then, you know, she's basically going through these goals saying, well, the next 2 weeks I want to go to an ABN, I want to advertise, and there's basically to-do list for today. Well, what do you want to do today? This app also, this is a little bit embarrassing, but it's, oh, sorry, this is, you know, swiping left, swiping right for doing delete, moving, that sort of stuff. Typical app development. The embarrassing part is this is for branding. You know, I have basically.
This is the welcome screen. Well,
so yeah, I can actually have, you know, context sensitive help with my head popping up and doing audio and all that sort of stuff. So that's kind of, you know, the app that I'm trying to develop. I had a week to do it. So that was my challenge. And I just want to talk briefly about now how to do that sort of stuff. So if you actually want to play with React and React Native, where are some good places to start? Kevin, any sort of comments along the way? Any clarification points before I get into that?
Yeah, so we just had one question here that was, does Expo accept any graphics? I'm presuming that we're asking questions about how Expo works, and they'll probably be answered in a minute.
Yeah, right. Yeah, so I'll go through. So when we start going through Expo, you can ask sort of lower level questions. So yeah, so that was kind of a framing of, yeah, use your superpowers for good. Agile is very cool for other things. This is the app I'm developing. Now we'll get into the technical, low level, yeah, Expo stuff.
Awesome.
So yep, cool. So basically, this is really about mobile app development using React Native and Expo for dummies like myself, who didn't really have that experience. So I was actually doing prototyping of apps using React, and you can still use it like an app on a phone or an iPad, just sort of bookmarking it, and for a user experience is basically identical. But here, you know, if you want to write native code, how would you do that? So the number one resource that I used that I found really cool was this guy called Mosh. He's got a website called codewithmosh.com, and he's got a whole range of really cool tutorials. So with the React stuff, React Native, I think it's about $20 a month for unlimited access to all of his stuff. But he goes from nothing to writing a full developed app within a couple of days using this tutorial. And that's kind of what I did as a starting point to just understand how React, you know, works, React Native works compared to React. What are its strengths and limitations? Because it is a bit different from React, and I'll talk about some of those things right now. So what is React Native? Before we get into Expo. So it's really a framework for building native apps for iOS and Android, and also the web. You can create web apps using just JavaScript. So it used to be that you needed, you know, Swift or, you know, other sort of low-level languages for programming each of these. These days, you can just with JavaScript come up with a really cool app without knowing sort of low-level details on how to program for each of these. And so, you know, you don't necessarily need to know how to program specifically for iOS or Android programming unless you want to get complex. React Native does allow you to do that. So it does allow you to go into each one of those development, you know, developing for iOS and Android and writing low-level code if you want to. But for the majority of use cases, you can write everything just in JavaScript. And that's very useful for someone like me who doesn't really, you know, you basically write once and you can deploy over iOS and Android. So some of the kinds of apps that are written in React Native, Facebook, Uber, Instagram. So it is quite a powerful language. There's much you can achieve. So what is Expo? So we have, you can write apps using the React Native command line interface. But what Expo does is it kind of simplifies that process. So it sits on top and hides a lot of the complexity getting you started. So really you can get sort of a boilerplate template working within like a couple of minutes. And it's really simple from that. So again, it's just hiding a lot of the complexity. For example, if you're using the React Native CLI, you basically get 2 folders, one for Android and iOS, whereas in Expo it doesn't. It hides all that complexity. So you basically write one body of code. If you want to branch out and do something different for iOS or Android, you have to basically leave the Expo environment. So to get started with Expo, again, it's really simple. You basically do an install of the Expo's command line interface, and then basically do Expo init my app to basically create that template for creating your first app. And then you basically hit Expo start. So when you do that, let me share a different screen if I can. Where have I gone? I don't need OBS anymore. Sorry, just give me a second. I have lost Zoom. Meeting controls. No. Stop share. Okay, I want to share something different. So if I can share. Sorry, this was so much easier in OBS, but it's not going to work. So I'll do screen sharing. But so basically, when you create that that template, you get this blank sort of project, which is your first app. Oops, I moved that. Is that showing okay?
That's beautiful and clear.
Cool. Okay, so as I said, it's really quite interesting. This is your first ever sort of hello world app, and it's basically throwing text up on the screen. There's a few things to note. The difference between React Native and React is you don't use HTML. You basically have a set of components that are specific to mobile platforms. So instead of a div, for instance, you have a view component. And you don't have paragraphs or anything. You just basically have a text component. So you need to be aware, first of all, of the different components that you need. So as I said, this tutorial that I sort of flagged goes through all of those components. There's a React Native website that lists all the components that's really easy to get into. So once you have a familiarity with some of these basic components, it's really easy to start building this. And so when you actually do the Expo start, what that pulls up, I'll just swap again. I'll stop share, whoops, and I'll share the other screen. So what you'll see here is basically when you do the Expo start, it starts up this server, which is basically a web server, local host, and it allows you from this, which is quite interesting, to hook up various emulators. So from your code, you can pull up an iOS simulator. If you can't really do that through Windows, I don't think. I think you need to be on a Mac, but you can run it in a web browser, for instance, and this is your first ever mobile app that I just showed, basically. And also the cool thing about this, if you download Expo onto your phone or mobile device, you can actually run that code live. So if you make any changes in your code, it's updated instantaneously on your phone, and you can see things change in real time. So for example, if you change the color of a component, it will automatically change that. It won't actually reload the whole project. It will actually just change the color of that component on your phone, which is a really cool way of iterating and seeing how things look. So yeah, so this is kind of high level. You can actually view what it looks like through a web browser, through an emulator, through your phone, etc. And it's really simple to do. So 30 seconds and you've got your first Hello World app up and running, which is cool. Kevin, any sort of questions, comments so far? I'm going to go.
No new ones. You're all good. You're all good. No, we yeah, I think everyone's just taking it in at this point. I've linked a few things. I could put the expo link out there for everyone as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, everyone, if you've got questions, do shoot them through the. I'm even watching the live chat for questions as well. If you can't reach Slido for any reason, so feel free to jump on Slido.
So I'll continue going into details. I'm running out of time, I understand that. But I'll just show you some of the differences between, I guess, React and React Native or Expo. And I'll just go back to basically file structures. So if I just want to share, I'll stop sharing and share my screen again. If I go back to Visual Code, the things that you've got to watch is, for example, in HTML, when you set a style, you have basically a CSS file. You don't really have the equivalent in React Native. And the interesting thing is it doesn't cascade down. So if you have a style basically in here in view that's setting a color, these child components don't have that color. It's kind of a local scope for style. And that can be quite annoying. And you basically have a style sheet that you create that specifies, each of those components. So here's basically that that view, which is I'm setting the background color and basically centering the item and then putting the text. So what you can do is basically change the style inline here. So if I set something like color is blue, and I save that, and then I go back to my website, sorry, stop share and share. So that's, what you'll see is that's changed blue. It does cascade with if it's all text components, but as it doesn't, so the style of, this text component did, but the higher level components won't. So as I said, that's one of the differences. You don't have CSS. You need to come up with these style sheets. And hang on, I will just go back to my code and just show you how it's generally structured. So if you're setting up a React Native or Expo site, basically, and I'll show you recent. So this is my app, and this is the sort of the file structure. So you have the overarching app that's calling all of these other components. Generally, you put the reusable components, for instance, in a components folder. And this is what Mosh did with his tutorial, is basically overwrite a text component. And he actually came up with a file, the config file, that basically has all the styles in it. So this is kind of the equivalent of CSS. So basically, he has a file that has all the colors, like primary color, secondary color, and styles. So here, text is basically, the default color is colors.dark. So instead of CSS, you basically, can have a config file that's basically specified. And then when he's writing a component, such as app text, which is basically superseding the text component, is basically setting the style on that. So anytime you use the app text component, it has the default style that you're using with, rather than having to, every single time you have a text component, set the style, just use basically an app text component. So he puts all of his components basically in a reusable components within a folder, and then basically has a config file that does the equivalent of what CSS is doing. So conceptually, that's kind of one of the differences between HTML and React Native. It's what to do with these components. The other cool thing is that navigation. So I'm just trying to think, screens. So navigation, how you do navigation is basically use the navigation here, tab.navigator here, and I'm basically setting up that bottom icon per tab, which is basically I specify, like there's a to-do tab, and I specified particular icon to use. It's really simple. And then I specify what is on that screen. So I basically specify a tab for each of those icons and refer to up the top. For example, here I had a aspirations stack, which has a number of screens within that. So basically you have tabs and screens that you can specify. And if you go into aspiration, for example, here, what's passed in to your component is a navigation. Where are we? So navigation sort of property here that you can reference. So basically when something's clicked, I can say navigate to this other panel. So navigation, again, is one of those simple things that works really well on mobile. It's a different way of thinking compared to the web. So again, that's sort of the high level differences is you need to think like a mobile developer and what are the native ways of interacting with the mobile device compared to HTML, and write your code in a way that is aligned with that. So
right, There's a couple of questions around that, and I think that actually applies. There's one here where it's like, so when React Native Web was made, that's some years old. So you could write React Native and still have a web app utilizing the same code from native apps. Is this a better replacement for that? Essentially, is the question.
Well, okay, so you can. So this actually exports to 3 things. So you can. So what I showed you before is actually a web app that's exported as well. But I wouldn't actually use that. So when I write my own code, I find writing for trying to fit a mobile app on a web page where it's like, all the interactions are swipes and that sort of stuff. That's annoying. So I would actually segregate a normal HTML code, think about how people actually interact with the web, which is different from how they interact with a mobile device. So think about the user experience and how they interact with it and what's actually most applicable for that that interaction, I think. Yeah.
Great answer. There's another one in there. Is Expo adding all the JS APIs that you need to allow more JS-driven app development? So I'm assuming the question is asking, does it have all the JavaScript APIs to access sort of device aspects?
Okay, so I'll show you that. That's a really good question. I'll just show you the website because Expo builds on top of React Native and it has extra components. I'll just
that comes up in the next in the other question that's here. It's when you choose web, does that use React Native for web?
I don't know. I don't know. Do you know, Kevin?
I don't. I haven't had any firsthand experience with that one. So, React Native. I know that was React Native Web, and that's the one that was alluded to before.
Yeah,
React Native for Web was basically trying to export then to a web target. So it was the reverse, right? We were writing web technologies to create apps that were native. It was compiling onto that, but then they wanted to use a single code base sometimes and not have to reuse that recreate that functionality. So they went and had React Native Web as an output target. And the question is, when you choose web using Expo, is it doing that essentially?
It sounds like it probably would. I don't know, but that sounds like it would be something that
it's a question left for the reader.
But when you actually go through the reference, it actually does specify. So this is Expo, and these are sorts of the low-level things that you can, and it's basically saying which of the devices it does support. So it's got web as well.
Mark Lawler on our chat has said Expo uses React Native Web for its web build. Thank you, Mark, and good to see you in the chat.
Nice.
Thanks, Mark.
So here is a list of all the things that you can actually access on the device, which is very low-level stuff, which is really cool. It even has things like face recognition that you can access, payments, all those sorts of things. So it's actually quite extensive. Authentication, a whole range of things, which is really cool. Camera and that sort of stuff. So basically through Expo, you can access all those sort of low-level features of the phone, which is what you can't do.
And this, I guess, provides all those low-level APIs translated and made common for each platform.
That's
I guess this comes into one of the other questions that's here is, Did you come across any occasions where you had to tailor specifically to iOS or specifically to Android using React Native? For example, any specific UI code for either side?
Not yet. So the question is, depends what level of complexity. There are some low-level differences. So, for example, in choosing fonts. So I'll just try and find an example of that. But hang on, I'll just. So there are instances where
fonts could make you unstuck.
Hang on. So even it's something simple like this is from the Mosh tutorials, how he does basically he detects what platform it is and chooses a font that's actually appropriate for that platform.
Okay. Yeah,
so there are ways of detecting what platform you are on, but generally speaking, a lot of the functionality in terms of the low-level features of the phone, as you said, there is a high-level interface that basically compiles to the lower-level equivalent, as long as there's one on the other. But just going back to that website, I'm sorry, having to change between these. There are some cases where it won't work on one or the other. So you just need to be aware of some of these, like for example, face recognition was one of them that was better suited to iOS than Android. And it just goes into not everything translates particularly well. Face detector, for instance, and it gives you warnings of what known issues on particular devices.
Depends what's on the platform that you're targeting. What's available there, which makes sense. You have that in the native app world anyway.
That's right. Yeah.
So, fantastic.
So just to summarize, if you're familiar with React, I think to switch over to React Native, it did scare me. It only took a couple of days to having that knowledge of React, swapping over to using Expo. And that code with Mosh was actually a really good resource if anyone wants to dive in. And just having another developer going into low-level detail of what their thinking is, how they structure the file system, all those sorts of things was actually really useful, because I'm sort of generally a sole developer. And just having that low-level 20 hours of someone telling you their thought processes is sometimes quite useful. So if you want to contact me, LinkedIn is probably the best. Dr. Scott Bolland. My interests are React, Expo, Redux, AWS Amplify, using agile design thinking to help teams, organizations build resilience in uncertain, complex times. So all good.
Thanks so much, Scott. That's wonderful. If we do get any more questions in through, we'll circle around at the end and we'll be able to answer those, or we'll do a break between talks as well. I've got the 3 questions that we forgot. I didn't see because I don't know, WebSockets. How do they work? They decided to die on the Slido page. So I didn't see that there was 3 questions for DeveloperSteve. So we can always get him back on now, and we can ask those questions. But thanks again. Round of applause.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate your talk, and we'll make sure that we can get out all those all the links and resources that you want to share with everyone as well.
Well, thank you. Great. Cheers.
Thank you. DeveloperSteve, are you there? Can you hop on and answer 3 questions? Otherwise, we'll do it at the end. There he is.
Hang on a sec. Sorry, I was moving between a couple of things while we're doing that. Hello. Wait, you can hear me?
Yes, certainly can.
Yay.
So before these become less relevant, because everyone's still got this in their head as well. They wanted to ask, how does it actually interact with the device? So you were probably presenting your table and your lights on your cake at that time, I think. So how does the Node-RED engine go and interact with the device in a short answer?
There's basically this thing called a broker. It's kind of like a really low-level messaging bus. It's like a really low-level JSON bridge almost, where Node-RED puts a message into a particular topic on the broker, and the device is listening to that as well. And then the reverse of that is, well, with the sensor board anyway, it puts an update back into a different topic on the, it's literally like a low-level messaging bus.
There you go, message bus. Tick. Steve, should I attend Give Backathon in March?
Yes, you definitely should. Most definitely you should. In fact, I'm posting about that tomorrow. Right? Yes. We had a meeting earlier about that one, but yeah, totally. Find out some more details about that. But yes, you should.
Awesome. And I think that's either the same person or they're both anonymous posts, so I can't tell. Is it this event? The Cloud Theatre Space, Give Backathon, register. That looks like the right URL.
Yes,
Cool.
and there's an Eventbrite floating around as well. But I'll post it on the meetup board after this as well. But yeah, totally worth checking that one out. There's some VR stuff happening, and you can do JavaScript and VR things, but maybe that's another talk.
I like JavaScript and VR things, so this is sounding better already. Sounds like your next talk.
Totally is. Thank you.
So many tricks. Thanks for jumping back on. All good. We're going to go in. I think. Let me go to my list. Yes, we're going to Ashley Davis's REST client lightning talk. Ashley Davis, are you there?
Hey,
there he is.
Can you hear me?
Certainly can.
Cool. Well, thanks, Kevin. It's always good to be talking on BrisJS. So thanks again for the opportunity. Hi, everyone. My name's Ashley.
Pleasure's all ours.
And tonight I'm doing a quick demo of REST client for Visual Studio Code. But before we get into that, I'd just like to make a big announcement, actually. My book, Bootstrapping Microservices, has hit the dead tree copy. So it's actually been printed. So a year and a half in the making, and I can finally hold it in my hands. So what it is, if you want to learn about microservices, this is a practical and project-based guide that'll take you all the way through from making a single microservice all the way through to deploying a whole multi-microservice application to production. And you know, when you're building microservices, the language and the tech stack, it doesn't matter so much. You can use any tech stack, but for us JavaScript lovers, all the examples in the book are in JavaScript and built on Node.js. So keep an eye out. In the next few months, I'm hoping to do a bigger talk for BrisJS, and I'll be giving a bunch of copies of these away. So keep an eye out for that. So what is REST client for Visual Studio Code? Well, it's an extension. It's a plugin for Visual Studio Code that allows you to make REST API requests directly from Visual Studio Code without having to leave it. So it's a bit like Postman, if you know what Postman is. It's that kind of thing that allows you to kind of test your REST APIs. So really, really good for testing any REST APIs that you're working on. And it's also, I found it to be really awesome if you're going into a new company, into a new job, and you're trying to figure out how all their REST APIs work, really good for exploring other people's REST APIs. So I'm just going to switch over to share screen, and I'm going to show you what it's all about. So this is their webpage. You don't need to install it or anything from here, but I will come back to this in a moment and show you again, because there's some really good examples of how to use it on here. I'm just going to jump into Visual Studio Code and just give you a live demo. So first of all, you might want to install it. So if you go up to, where is it? Up to View, Command Palette, or Control-Shift-P. It's just at the top of my list there. Install extensions is what I want. But if you don't see it in your list, if you haven't used it recently or something like that, you can just start typing install or extensions or something like that. Click on that. You know, that allows you to search all the extensions that are available for Visual Studio Code. And what we want is the REST client that comes to the top there if you just type REST. So you can click on that, and I've already got it installed here, so my only option is to uninstall it. But if you see that, if you haven't got it installed, this is where you'll be able to click install and get it. So once you've got it, you make a file. Let's just call it blah. You see I've made this before when I was practicing. So I've called it blah.http. Now this .http bit is important because that's what allows the REST client extension to kind of know that that's its file. And then from here, if I want to do a HTTP GET request, I can just type GET and, you know, some web page or some REST API. And you can see that it's automatically put a little button there called send request. So if I hit that send request, it gets back the contents of Google's web page. So, you know, that's not very useful. So let's look at something that is a REST API. And for this, I'm going to use JSON placeholder, which is a really cool little API server that's there for just trying out stuff like this, really. There's nothing behind it. It's just sort of a mock REST API. But I'm just going to copy the URL that they give you right here. And I'll chuck that into my request here. If my cut and paste was working, give me a second. Do this the manual way to make sure it works. Cool. So I'll just zoom out a little bit. Hopefully you can still see that. So I'm doing a HTTP GET request against this mock REST API. I'm clicking on send request. And basically you get back a little bit of a kind of JSON data at the end here. And you can see that it prints out all the response headings as well. So there's a lot there that you might not normally see. That's all there. Now, if you want to make, you can make multiple requests in this file, and you just have to split them apart with this triple hash. So I could put whatever, I could put more HTTP GET requests here, but I'm just going to show you a post request. And I think if I just post to this, I think it's just going to echo it back to me. So let's do that and see if it works. After you've typed your request, you can actually type request headers, and it's got some auto completion there, which is really useful. But what I want to tell it is the content type is application JSON, and then I can give it a JSON body, and that can be whatever I want. I think, if I remember correctly, it's just going to echo it back to me. No, it hasn't done anything. I'm not sure if I've done something wrong there, if it just doesn't accept that. Let's just try giving it a... Hang on, let me try giving it some data that it might understand. I'm not sure exactly what I've done wrong here. Oh, maybe actually, sorry, maybe I've got to just do it directly to that without the one there. Okay, that's looking better. So let's just try that one I did before and just see if it actually works the way I thought it did. So we're just going to see if it echoes this hello world back at me. Make sure my JSON is well formed. Yeah, cool. So I was just hitting the wrong route there, basically, on that API. But so you can see I've made 2 requests there. Obviously, you can put, you can just keep going. You can put as many requests in here as you want. Something like Postman is probably more sophisticated for this. It might be better for sharing with teams. But I actually prefer this REST client, because you don't have to leave Visual Studio Code. You make your REST API request direct from Visual Studio Code. You're storing the whole thing in a code file. Basically, this is like some sort of script, right? So you can actually commit this. You can commit this to your repo alongside your REST API that you're testing. So that's really cool. And then obviously you can version control it because it's code, and you can share it with your teammates through the repository. So it's a really cool way to work. There's heaps more you can do with it as well. Let me just go back to the web page. So there is a bunch of stuff that you can do in Postman that you can do here as well, like having variables, and you can have environments. Like you can have an environment for your test servers, an environment for your production servers, an environment for dev, and just change between these, and it's going to change what you're talking to. If you need to get started with it, coming to this web page is just a great place to start, because it just gives you like some super simple examples here of how to get started. And then it gets more complicated as you go down. But what I just want to show you in the examples here is how the variables work. Oh yes, it's got an example here with GraphQL for anyone who's into making requests against GraphQL servers. Where is it? It's got a section on authentication. That's not the bit I want. Somewhere down here. Oh, here's the bit on environment. So this will give you what you need to do to be able to switch between different and testing different environments. Variables is the cool bit. So you can basically define variables like, what is the base URL of your REST API that you're going to hit. You can have that in a variable, and then you can just like share that between all your requests. And you can do this really cool thing where you can name your requests. So like here's an example of naming a request. And then, is there an example of it here? I don't think so. Well, once you've named your request, you can basically pull variables out of the response body for that request. So this is really good for authentication. Here's an example here. So you can see here's a request here that does authentication. They've given it the name login. So after they've hit the button to make that request, they can go down to this one here, and you can see here that from that login request, from the response, they're pulling out the auth token out of the response headers, and they're storing that in a variable. So they can share that authentication mechanism then with all the other requests that they're doing. So I think that's about it.
I've got a couple of questions for you if you want them.
Yeah, cool. That'd be great.
Nice. All right. First one is, can this be integrated into docs like Markdown to explain API examples? I can't read. Apologies.
Not that I'm aware of, but that would be a really cool use case. Actually, you know, there's one thing that I want to do with this that I don't think it does. And I want to be able to run these scripts from the command line, because I reckon it would be a really great way to just, in your CD pipeline, have a really cool way to kind of test your deployments automatically. So it's open source as well. There's a link to the repository here. And
so you might need a shell.
I don't think you can run this from the command line, but I'll tell you what, I really want to fork this and be able to do that, because it would be so cool.
Yeah, a shell script that can read that format and just execute them as native curl commands. That'd be cool. Very nice. There's another question. Can I chain REST commands between multiple files like you showed?
I don't know if that works between files. I would assume that it doesn't.
Yeah, fair enough.
But you know,
if you could like import them between. Yeah.
Just so you don't have to leave Visual Studio Code. Honestly, like it's worth using just for that. And I was using this like before they had environments and variables. So those are the kinds of things that I liked using in Postman. And I went using this REST client, like even before it had that stuff. That's how much how useful it was to me.
Awesome. I've installed it. You convinced me.
Yeah.
Happy customer. Awesome. Well, thanks very much for taking us through that.
Yeah, no worries.
Awesome. Yeah, like I've been saying, between all the other ones, if you feel like you missed the boat and you got another question, feel free to throw it up anyway. We will be able to circle back around and ask those questions at the end. But thanks very much.
Thank you.
Congrats on the book.
Yeah,
we definitely have to highlight that one as well. Multi-book published author. I don't know if there's a term for that. Hopefully we can say multi-award winning author.
Serial author.
Serial author, yep, it works. Oh, good. Thanks very much, Ashley.
Cheers, see you.
All right, let us bring to the stage Aminur. Are you there? He's there. I can see. There he is. How you doing, Aminur? Just a mute. Looking for the
Yeah, hi.
There we go.
So,
we can hear you.
Yeah, okay. So I'll just share my
Welcome to
screen.
BrisJS.
Yeah, hi, hello everyone. So good evening. So my name is Aminur, and I'm a technical architect working with Hitachi ABB. I've previously worked with Citibank and Symantec and Cognizant. Yeah, so I'll just share my screen.
Go right ahead.
So hope everyone is able to see my screen.
Yeah, we can see the PowerPoint application.
Yeah, so today I'm going to talk about progressive web apps, basically mainly about the service workers in progressive web apps, the advantages of progressive web app and service worker as such, so which I've implemented in my project as well. So to talk about progressive web apps, if you see, it's mainly used for when you're offline or online, regardless of the connection. We can use progressive web apps, and for faster loading of the web page, and for push notifications as well. And you can even create a shortcut to the home screen, and it actually gives a look of a native web app. So basically, if you want to create something out of which you want to act as a web app as well as a browser, so you can think of developing a progressive web app so that it works both in the as a web app as well as in the browser, irrespective of the screen size. So going to the next screen. So if you see here, it actually works as an interceptor. It intercepts all the calls which goes from the browser to the server. That's why it should be in the secure socket layer. So it should have the HTTPS. It works only in HTTPS secure socket layer. And if you see, coming to the next screen. So if you see, if you're like in an elevator or something where there is no active connection, so you will be seeing the screen unable to connect to the internet. So what the service worker does is, so it just intercepts, and it actually basically it stores all the pages in the sense what all requests you have made. It just stores in the cache of your browser. So if you just press F12 and go to application tab, you can see the service worker and the cache storage, IndexedDB, background sync, everything, whatever the progressive web apps is able to provide. So from there, it just fetches the whatever the resource you have requested, and it just gives it from the cache storage instead of going to the server when you're offline. So that's why it is like a grade over here. So just show like it is offline, how the service worker acts in between, and it just provides the resource you need when you're offline. And another thing is, so you might have seen, I don't know how many people have seen like pressing F12 and going to application tab and just see like how many service workers are running in your browser. So many companies use service worker behind the scenes to use for push notification and use for background sync and do all the tasks in the background. So if the service worker is running some background sync, and even if you close the browser, it will run in the background. So irrespective, even if you have closed the browser. So that is the use of the background jobs with the service worker. And coming to creating the service worker as such. So this is the basic script which you need to have it in your master page or your landing page. So you just check for the service worker, and if it is suppose you have named the service worker as the service worker.js, and it should basically reside in the path, in the main path, so that all the resources with that main path, it is under the scope of service worker. So that's why if it is successful, then you just log it like service worker registered with scope, and then if it is failed, it will just log that as well. And coming to the next screen. So if you see, as I said, if you press F12 and go to the network, and suppose if you want to simulate something in the Google Chrome to work offline, so you can just go to the network tab and just press on offline, check that offline checkbox, so that whatever calls you make, it will be handled in offline. And this is the this is where I just want to just go through this code. So basically what we are doing is, so we are just creating a response. As I said, suppose if you are offline, what it will do is, so what you're doing here is you are just creating a response. That's what it's there in this response content variable. And you are just adding an event listener to the fetch event. So after the fetch is completed, whatever the request is, so it just fetches that request. It can be any resource, it can be image, it can be an API, it can be anything. So it just fetches that, and it returns the response. and it returns, basically what it does is it returns the response from the cache, and we have not dealt with the cache yet, so it just fetches that event, fetches the request. And if it fails, if suppose it will fail when it is offline, so what it will be, go to the cache block, and if you see here, we are just sending the response of the whatever we have created, the response content over here. So it is, if it is offline, then if you see in the next slide, it will be, for example, this is the image in, it is just a sample hotel. So it's like, so it will just give this response to you. This is the example of how we can handle the offline message, like user-friendly offline message. And coming to the service worker life cycle. So if you see, it is having all these stages. So initially it will be like installing, and then it will be like install, it goes to the installed waiting stage, and then it's activating and activated, and if it's like unsuccessful, it goes to the redundant stage. So that's the service worker life cycle. Basically, we will just hook up, we will just register for the events in each and every stage, which I will show shortly. So if you see here, as I said, so what we are doing here is we have just added the event listener to the install event, and then to the activate event. After that, as I showed earlier, we are just fetching something. And suppose, as I said, it is just an interceptor, so we can intercept anything. So what we are in this code, what we are doing here is, so we are just intercepting for the URL if it includes bootstrap admin.css. So what we are doing is, if it has this in the URL, so we are just responding it with a new response, and we are just creating the CSS, and we are just sending it to the browser. So this is about the power of the service worker to intercept all the calls which are making from the browser. And coming to the updating the service worker. So suppose if you see in the previous code, there was like the background green important, and coming to the next one, it is like red important. So now we have changed the service worker. What it will happen is, if I show you in the next slide, so there is actually two service worker running in the browser. So one will be activated and running, and another will be in the waiting state. So unless and until you close this browser, close the browser and go to a next browser, and go to a next tab, it will still be, the old service worker will still be in active state only. After that, it will just go out of the scope, and the new service worker will be activated. So this is about updating the service worker. So how would see, if you see here, it waiting stage, and then after that, the new service worker, it releases control of the old one. And coming to the next slide. So this is, as I said earlier, so this is about the cache management. So if you see, we have just, if you see, there is a variable called cached URLs. So basically, we cache all the URLs upfront during the load itself. So if you see here, during the install event, we are just caching. We are just opening the cache, and then we are just using the cache name. Here in this case, it is like gih-cache, and then we are just caching all the URLs over here. Okay, and then after that, we are going to the fetch event. So here, what happens is, it just fetches that event, fetches that resource, and if it matches the cache, so it returns from the cache. Or else, what it does is, it just goes to the index offline HTML. So if it doesn't match, or if the page is offline, what it does is it returns from the offline, that is, it returns from the cache, whatever the offline HTML we have, so that the user knows like he is offline. Coming to the next slide. So as I showed here, as I showed previously, we have two service worker. In this case, suppose if I want to change something, if I want to change the cache name to like version 1, version 2, then what will happen is as soon as anything you change in the service worker, so that will be considered as a new service worker. And if you see here, that has been hidden over here. If you see, there are like every service worker maintains its own cache. So here, if you see, there is a cache storage, and there is this GIH cache, and there is another one which is like hidden. So that will be like whatever the cache name you have given, changed it to like GIH-cache v1 version 1 version 2, and that goes out of scope once you close the browser and you open a new browser or a new tab. And then if you see here, and this is what I was talking about, the cache management and clearing old caches. Suppose if you want to clear all the caches, so in the activate event, what you're doing is you're just searching for that cache name that starts with, and then you're just deleting those caches which you are no longer using it. So this is about the cache which you are no longer using and no longer it's in the scope. The older service worker and its cache storage. This is about deleting the cache. And service worker, as you know, like it works completely with the promise-based calls. Yeah, so this is about it. And still I have some topics need to be covered on the caching strategy for service worker, and then how about to do a background sync in that, and how about to basically the background sync runs in a separate thread as such, and not with the UI thread. And if you want to communicate from the background sync to the UI thread, you use something called the post message. There is, as you people might be knowing, like there is already called web worker, and web worker, it is even more advanced. The service worker, it uses the post message to just send a message from the background sync to the UI thread. Yeah, so maybe hopefully I will cover it the next time. Yeah, thanks.
That's awesome. Thanks so much.
Yeah,
it's really good to see some of the internal logic there about how you can leverage that as kind of a cache store. There's a couple of questions in here. I don't know which order to go and present them in. The first one is, can I simulate a proxy server with a service worker?
Yeah, sure. The service worker itself acts like a proxy. So whatever you have, you can just go to the browser, as I said, press F12 in Chrome, and just go and see like whatever you have. And that's why it needs to be secured, and it needs to be having a secure circuit layer certificate. Yeah. Right.
Need that SSL. What else we got here? Does the service worker have access to the browser storage mechanisms like IndexedDB or WebSQL? And they said, I know it should be sandboxed. So how much access does it have to some of the browser resources? I think.
Yeah, definitely. That is another topic maybe I'll be covering in the future. So IndexedDB as such, that's how you communicate with the UI thread to the background thread. So because as you know, like IndexedDB can be accessed, it is like not thread dependent. So it works in a callback methodology. So that's how you just pass the messages. That is one way of passing the messages from the IndexedDB, through IndexedDB, from the UI thread to the background thread. So basically, if it's like, suppose you are filling some form and you just click on submit, that's it, fine. And you are not waiting for the browser to respond. So everything is taken care of by the background thread. And eventually, if you have opted for push notification, it will send a push notification, or else maybe it will send a mail or so. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, that's good. And somebody gave us some nice info here. An easy way to get started with some nice tools is Workbox. It's from the Google Developers Web Toolbox. I'll share that link on the chat. And thanks for the anonymous sharer of that information as well. And we'll make sure to share any other resources here from these slides as well. and put them up on our GitHub issues page. And yeah, we're looking forward to have you around again, and we can keep building the knowledge. And it's kind of like a project we're building up together through BrisJS presentations. I love the idea.
Yeah. Thank you.
That's awesome. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. See you. Bye. Thanks, guys.
Thanks very much. All right. Cool. Well, it's been a packed night. Thank you everyone who stayed for the entirety. We've actually seen numbers continually increase. So thanks so much for everyone who's joined late into the event. Obviously, there's that whole TVR kind of experience where you do the playback stream, and it picks right off from whenever you join. You get part of the live and part of the pre-recorded. It's a great idea that Google's implemented with their live streams. But yeah, it's going to be available online for everyone to enjoy in the future. So it's all part of, it's all going to be public on YouTube, on our channel. Great. So I'm going to throw to my final slide and then say thank you to everyone. And thank you, everyone. So just another reminder, feel free to get in any of your talk submissions. It doesn't matter when you want to do them. We will organize that as part of the process in the GitHub issues. I realize that not everyone is on GitHub or wants to be part of that ecosystem. If that's you, then feel free to reach out to me with Twitter through the BrisJS handle, or KevDesign, or hit me up on email. My email address is on the screen there as well. I'm happy to help you out in any way that we can get these talks happening. So no problem whatsoever. So do reach out. We're on Facebook chat too, but you can talk to me directly through that as well, because it comes with the business page that we've set up. So yeah, any which way that works. There is also the Brisbane Slack, so brisbane.slack.com. I want to say com. That's in there as well. We should start to leverage that a little bit more. That's got a BrisJS channel and a JS channel on there. So if you're a person who enjoys Slack, you can do that as well. I'm toying up the idea of starting a Discord for our community. Shout out if anyone thinks that's a wonderful idea. If there's overwhelming support for that, I'll put in the hard yards and see what I have to do. Yeah, thanks so much, everyone. Don't forget, there's the giveaway comp of I think it's Wallaby that we're doing this time around. I'm not sure if we did that one in September. We like to, December. We like to alternate. Yeah, there's Wallaby.js or Quokka.js that we give away. So we'll see which one that is. And I'll do the announcements for both December and February next month. But yeah, if you haven't already seen my email, check your email. You could be a winner. Thanks very much for answering the questions in previous events. Yeah, so thanks very much, everyone. And we'll see you next month.
Yeah, thank you. See you.
See you. Bye.
Bye, guys.